Try one more go. No, he's going to have to live with that tonight. I wouldn't be happy with that, and I think probably it's best to have the grain running this way on these tiny little pots, because that's not happened on any of the others that I've made. So the next bit is to hollow it out, and when I'm hollowing, I do prefer to move the headstock around. This one will swing round, not a lot, just to there, which I think is 30 degrees. Oh, better tighten it up again. And again, I'd probably make a batch of these. So I'd make all those bits first, and then I'd turn this round and I'd do half a dozen or a dozen all this way. And just use the spindle gouge to go in here. So I'm cutting with a pull cut towards me from the center. Not too much at once. A slight swing as I'm doing it. And swiveling this round allows me to be looking straight down rather than sort of hanging over here and this getting in the way. So the flute's about 7 o'clock, I think you would call that. And I want quite a thin wall at the end, so getting a lot of vibration. Let's just check that's all okay. Oh. Right. I definitely am not using the grain this way again. It does. Absolute failure. Yeah. It's a pouring version, yeah. Too much vibration, it's just broken off. And this is what I was saying, if the grain's going across rather than long ways, there's far more tendency for it to break out. And that's exactly what it's done. So that piece of wood wasn't a good choice. I'm not going to make it again, though. I'll just tell you what I would do next. I found this little tool a few years ago at Harrogate and find it absolutely great for this kind of thing. It's a depth gauge, and I know that people, some of the demonstrators have had their own versions with a pencil through a piece of card. I'm sure Phil Greenwood would have his own made. You can just put a pencil through there and take that off and have a look at it that way. But this thing only cost a couple of pounds, and it's been great for sizing. And then you can look, you can see I've got another 3/8 of an inch maybe before I get to the bottom of the bowl. But I've completely ruined that, so I'm not going to persist. Here's one I did earlier. Okay. What I will do is just part it off to show you how I do that. So once that's part of the process is done, I would return it to the center there. Now it's not too important that it's not, if it's not lined up at the moment, because all I'm going to do is part off. But at some point I will need to check that it's lined up again. And what I do to part these off is take a fairly thin parting chisel and go in at an angle of about 20 degrees. Doesn't like it at all. See, it's what's happening is the spring, because the grain is the wrong way around, the springing it is making it wobble. Maybe it's just the chuck that's come loose. No, it's not. Springing about too much. That's made it worse. Oh dear. Sorry? Another bit of firewood. Well, what I could do is cut that off and start again with this piece. And with it being nearer the chuck, it won't vibrate quite as much, but it's had it as that one. And I said, I've got another piece, but I don't know how time will go. We'll we might come back to it. So having made 2 of those, no, to hell with it. Let's go for it. Don't want to be defeated. Let's go for it again. So again, just check that that's aligned. It's not quite. So we just need a little bit of nudging. There we go. Nothing else. Hopefully this will show you what the difference in the grain makes. Quite often I wouldn't bother centering something like this, but it's quite important because the diameter I want is very close to the width of the wood. So if I guess wrong, I'm going to not have enough wood to make what I want. This has got a bit of wax on the end of it. So that's the side that I'm going to put away from here, because I want this to grip in. And if you use the waxy side, it tends to slip. There we go. So let's just see how quick. This has got all kinds of pyrography on it, which I just demonstrating to people how pyrography works. Okay, let's see what the difference is with the grain running this way. And remember my visor. You see the difference? Tempted to say that I did this on purpose, but that didn't catch at all, and it's because the grain's running that way, and this is a spindle roughing gouge. It's meant to work on grain which runs along the spindle. Just need to go a bit further. I had some calipers set to 24, there they are. I like to have 3 or 4 sets of calipers, and I have got enough, so that stays the same, particularly if I'm making a batch of things, rather than changing the calipers all the time. And again, that's 24. There we go. So get it held in the jaws as soon as possible. There we go. A rough marking out of what we want. Again, about there. Just delineate the bottom. You can see again, it's just pushing in like a piece of butter compared to the other one where it was catching all the time. So now, give it the little barrel shape. Bit of shear scraping. There we go. That's good enough. Put the decoration on. I will do it, yeah, why not? With the point tool, there it is. Give it a burn. Can't see properly with this on. There we go, there's a decoration. Swivel it round 30 degrees. There we go. It's got a detente on it which stops it at 30, 45 and 90, I believe. What? Yeah, thank you. It's quite stiff is this one, so I'd probably got away with it, but you're right, it needs tightening up. And then listen for the difference, I hope. So again, going in about that angle at 7 o'clock, pulling out. Can you hear a vibration? It's not there, is it? It's the grain. It needs to be the spindle grain that you're working on. Okay. So we need to see where the depth is. Yeah, we've got about another 1/4 of an inch or so. I've still got a bit of wax on the outside of this, so I'm going to have to just knock off the wax. There we go. I'm not very good at estimating depth, so I do need one of these, but thankfully I tend to underestimate it rather than overestimate it. So I don't often go through the end, but tonight could be an exception. Okay, so that's okay in there. It's pretty smooth. I would sand that out. I won't bother tonight. I would sand this and then return it to. Some people might think this is a bit faffy and not worth it, but I find it so much easier to work on the end there, just with that slight turn. And it's worth it enough for me to take the trouble to just move it. But as I say, normally I would probably do quite a few of these as a batch. Right. Now, we should be able to part this off. And again, there shouldn't be any vibration. It should go in like a piece of butter. I'm going in at a slight angle so that the base will be concave. I'm also clearing out enough wood to prevent it burning as I go in. Now, I could part that off and just hold it here and part it, but I found that sometimes the grain splinters into the surface that you want. So nowadays, I nearly always just cut it off. And then there's a little nib on the end here. So just sand that clean. I've just caught the edge of the bowl with the saw, so I'd have to do a little bit of individual sand in there. But there's a little salt pot. Need to make that first because it needs to fit this bit, which is what I'm going to make next. And this one doesn't fit on here. but they're made to fit each size. So let's take this chuck off now. Now, obviously, this is not in the center of the piece of wood. So I need to hold it off center so that I can put that in. And what I've done is I've got a chuck here, and I've just taken those two jaws off. And with a little bit of luck, this chuck fits the piece of wood that I found in my garage. Here we go. Now, I've marked this up. I've put the center line in, and I've put a center here. I'm not a woodworker, but I do know about these things. And I know that pressing on there and there, it should go in the same place. Look, it goes in. So I did use that to score it out, but I wasn't going to do it in front of you lot tonight because it's quite critical. If that isn't centered, and we will find out later, then it'll show up here. And you can get round it by sanding one side and not the other, but it's best to do it, get it right first time. So that should be centered. Two little offcuts from somewhere on the piece of wood. It's the same wood, and that should be enough to protect the sides while I clamp this in position with the other chuck key. There it is. I just realized that that's a record chuck, isn't it? Goes the other way around to these. So I'll just get those straight. And what I need to do is to get the center of the first circle lined up with the tailstock here. Now that's interesting. That isn't lining up quite right. And I think it's because these two pieces of wood are not quite the same width. Let's go for plan B. There's an old Venetian blind, which I've used before, and that will be the same size on both sides. Let's just move that round a bit. So I say this is just to protect it from the jaws biting in. There we go. And I need to get it flat against the base. There. And then I need to bring this up and get this, that's better. So I think that is lined up, yeah. And then the pressure here should force that flat. And then I can tighten that up. You all right, Steve? It's about your line first, or Martin might get it before you. My laptop could, or the camera could go, yeah. I haven't had one come out yet. I'm hoping that that is going to clear this base. What's going on? There we go. Sorry? Good thinking, yeah. Would help, a quarter of an inch or so. I haven't done it as yet. Just going to move that little bit of wood in further. I mean, this is only a little bit of decoration. I'm not going very deep with this. I just want that. There. If you did use a piece of wood, it would have to be plywood or something so that it was uniform width. Okay. So having done that, I need to get this the other side of the, use the big rest so that I can get up to it. I'm going to turn the speed down just because it's a bit more dangerous than it was. So that's 750. Looks like it's going okay. Should have some calipers. Which are not set to this. I want it just slightly bigger than the pot. That should do it. Just in case it comes off. There we go. And then now I could have turned it out again, and I haven't, and I think I will. Yeah, it's just okay. I'm just going to turn it round again. Just give me a clearer view of what I'm doing. Sorry? Tighten it again, yeah. I'm just testing you. Okay, so I'm going to go in. About a quarter of an inch. Doesn't seem very sharp. To go a bit deeper, but we'll just see if the pot fits. A bit tight. So a little bit bigger. Okay, it should be all right. Try it again. Perfect. That's just a little wobble is what I wanted. And then quite close to the sides, but there's enough to put a bit of decoration on. So this is a 6mm beading tool, and it will just create a little bead, which I'm going to put inside this circle. I find it helps to wobble them a little bit. I'm going to put another one in the center about there. Should really be a bit higher, and I shouldn't do that with a thing like that spinning round. So that will create a couple of beads. I've done different designs. It's really just what takes your fancy. Quite like the center to be taken out. So just going to put a little dint in the middle. For no reason other than I want it to, a bit of decoration. I'm just taking the edge off here as well. And then I would sand that at this stage. Again, I'll just do a little bit. There's some quite nasty draw. Remember, there's only 2 jaws there. So this can be a little bit dodgy. So I'm being careful where I put my fingers. Just not wanting to take the detail off really, but just getting it smooth. And I would probably go through the grits to 320 on that, but I won't tonight. So that's one. And as always, that's the easy one. The second one, I now need to put it back again because I want to line that center up with there. So yeah, that's what I was looking for. We'll just put that back. And line it up for the second one. So now the kiss test, I can see that lines up with the line on my piece of wood, so I don't need to put this back in, but it's a little bit too high, and that should be it. Then just push that in to center it and flatten it. Remember to tighten it up. Okay. And then I'm just going to take it out again. The calipers are still set to the right size. It's not quite as bad if it's flying around at the moment, so yeah, that'll do it. In with a parting chisel. Just test it for size. A little bit tight. So a tiny bit more. And then the first circle is easy because it's against the edge. Oh, I haven't checked if the edge is okay yet. Yep. That's not quite as deep as the other one, so just going to go in a little bit more. And then the beading tool just needs to be a bit higher. Should really point down a little bit. Okay. Just need to check that it isn't flat on the top of the bead, and it's not. Now, the first inside circle, it didn't matter what diameter it was, but this one does matter because you want it to match. So I need to actually mark this one out. For those of you who haven't done much with these, just remember you're only putting that point on the wood. This is just a guide. You mustn't put that one on as well, else it'll fly off and injure somebody. Right, so a little bead inside. That's okay. Nope, still a bit flat. Depending what sort of wood you use, sometimes these can tear it out quite a bit. And it's sometimes best to do the bulk of the work and then just finish it off with a spindle gouge, just to get the final finish on it. But this is beech and it's quite tight grained, so it's not tearing very much. Okay, so again, I would sand that at this stage. I've forgotten to take the edge off the, see if I can do it with the sandpaper. And I've forgotten to take the center out as well, so I'll just do that. And then we'll have a break. Yeah, it's got a little dimple on it. Okay. So just to recap. Trying to use up bits of old wood, bits of spare wood. The grain on this went that way, went across, and it was causing me all these problems catching, and just, well, you saw what happened. The grain on this one, similar, well, the same approach, but completely different effect, because it's a spindle rather than a bowl orientation. So I would make 2 of those. They both go in there now. Yep. And after the break, I'll take this off and then put it between centers this way to turn the handle. Do a little pyrography. Apologies for those of you that have seen me do it before, but I know there's a few people that haven't seen pyrography, so I'll just show you how to set it up. I won't do the entire thing. And then we'll have a look at how to make a little salt spoon, which is hopefully 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, so if we have a break now and try and get back about 5 to 9, 10 to 9. Thank you very much for your patience. Again, and that might be enough because you've got support here as well, but it's better if all 4 are in contact, and that will happen if that is square. And it saves having to hold it on a between centers. So we're going to try and turn that into a handle. I've left quite a bit here so that I can cut off to match whatever I end up with here. So it's a bit longer than it needs to be, and I will cut that off on a bandsaw, and then rather than trying to round, I'm showing somebody, the first one I did, at this stage, I tried to turn the sides. Can you imagine that? And it made it a bit thin, which means that the circles are very, very close to the edge. So the slightest difference from one side to the other shows up too much. So that was a reject. I didn't like that idea. And you can still see the hole from the tailstock because I didn't leave enough wood at the end here. But I don't tend to sort of draw things out and plan. I just try it and see how it goes, and then make another one and make it better. So didn't like that. If you didn't see the other pieces, whoops, that's one. It's just a piece of wood. There's no handle, and I didn't really like the idea of not having a handle, but it's okay. This one, I couldn't cut a piece from the shelving stuff long enough, so I put the handle in the center. And I couldn't do that with this one because there's not enough gap between the circles. Just needed to be a little bit more. So just playing around with the idea, really. And this one, there are no pinch pots. There's just 2 indentations, but it's held the same way in those jaws, and the 2 bowls are turned that way. So off we go. So I'll try and finish that, show you very quickly how I would put the writing on, the pyrography, and then we'll have a look at making a spoon. And that should take us to 9:30. So this can go back up to 1800. And want to turn it to round. Now here, when I made this one, when I was turning this, I turned it too close to the circle. So that's another reject, I'm afraid. It needs to be further away. So I'm going to be quite careful here. And you can see that's got the kind of distance. I really want that to match that distance there. So I can afford to go in a little bit more. Yep. When I'm looking at this, I can see the ghost of the shape from where I'm standing. I'm just going to have a little look at what kind of size I want. So this is going to be a slightly shorter handle. I haven't got much space to play with here. But will do. Okay. This is a 1/2 inch spindle gouge. Not much of it left. You can see how much I use it. This is my favorite #1 tool I use for more than anything else, but it's just about to run out. I'm talking to somebody at half-time, and what you can do when that runs out is you can turn it into a tool like that. You just put the 3 points on there on the grindstone and you've got a different tool, but it should last us a little bit longer. So let's just look at the shape. So this needs to come in and then go out a bit. Very close to the jaws here, so I'm being careful. But also I don't want to lose any of the wood if I can avoid it. And again, a bit of shear scraping. Sorry for those of you that are new to these things. This is a swept back grind on here. So they often call it a fingernail grind. And that creates about 1/2 inch of flat blade. And if you pull that blade along here, that's called shear scraping. And I find it a very good way of getting a smooth flowing curve. Whereas when you're cutting this way with the point straight on, it's not as easy to get that smooth flow. So with this kind of piece, I'm quite often shear scraping to get the shape I want. And then I'm going to come in here, make it a bit shorter. And that should do it. So there we go. That's this part I would finish off just with sandpaper or with the sander. This bit I would finish on the lathe. Again, I'll just do the briefest. Again, I need to be careful because there's a piece of wood that's flying around here that isn't round. So I'm not going to go too far up there. Beech is very forgiving for letting you finish it with the sandpaper. Perhaps a professional would want it finished off the tool, but I'm not a professional. There we go. Now you can try and do a bit of this. What you mustn't do is push it forward with your fingers. So that'll be finished off just by hand like this. And I would finish off the edges and I would round this off on a belt sander just to give it a bit of shape. I would put the 3 bands on. And this one, I've got 2 there and 1 there. Let's try it the other way around, see what we think. I think these subtle differences can make or break a piece. Again, just till the smoke appears. There we go. Just a little light sanding again. Now that I've done that. And I do all of that and the sanding before I tackle this piece here, because I want enough strength here while I'm sorting this out before I take it down to as narrow as I dare. And I'm going to do that with a parting chisel. Very, very close to the jaws, so it's a little bit dangerous. And I can just smooth that off a little bit with this smaller spindle gouge. And then I can sand it while it's still on here. I'm very careful where my fingers are and my hand. Okay. And then rather than trying to hold something as nasty as this and part it off, just use a saw. It's a bit tricky when you've got things between centers with the saw because there needs to be a bit of give. So there's a little noddle on there. You can just and tidy up. So there we go. So that's been turned on this center, and then on a completely different axis, center to center that way. And as I say, I would trim this off on a bandsaw, round off the edges like this, and put a bit of pyrography on, because that's one of the things that I do. So if you haven't done any pyrography, a quick run through my method. I create whatever it is that I want to write on a computer, and I use an option on the computer to reverse the writing, so it's mirror writing. So that when I put this on the piece of paper, it will be the right way around. And I can get the sizing absolutely correct on the computer as long as I make the piece first and then do the thing after. I haven't done that tonight, but next thing I do is I get a bit of water and a bit of tissue. Doesn't have to be fizzy. And just dampen the piece of wood. Not a lot, but enough. And then I can put, let's put this down here, whichever one of these fits. I think that'll fit. And what I normally do is cut this out . And I always put a box around it so that I can use the lines to square up the piece with the wood. So that goes there. Snip that off. And then I usually put a little bit of masking tape on. If I can find the end. So I line this up. Just need to be remembering that I'm going to cut a piece off later on the bandsaw. Normally I would do that before I do this stage. There we go. And then just using an ordinary pencil or a HB pencil, I just rub over all the writing fairly heavily. And this is why I put the masking tape on. Two reasons. One is keep it in place, but I can just have a look and make sure that it's all come through. And if it hasn't, I can stick it back on in the same place. But it has come through. So there's my writing. You might not be able to see it, but it's enough there for me to now pyrograph. And I use the Peter Child machine, which I know quite a few of you have got. This is, I tell everybody who's starting pyrography, you should be working somewhere between 2 and 3. If you go up to 4, it's beginning to get a bit hot. You might have to sometimes, it depends how narrow you make your nib. But 2 or 3 is usually enough. And Obviously, I'll be doing this on a bench normally, but here I will just outline one side of the letter P. I don't know if you can see that. Is that coming across on the overhead one? Yeah. There we go. And I'm using it more like a brush than a pen. That would be my advice. And then I do the other side of the letter P. I would have a block of wood to rest my hand on normally. There we go. And do the same for the rest of the writing. So it just adds a bit of something to it. It says a pinch of salt and a dash of pepper. For no other reason than I quite like doing pyrography. So there you go. Before I'll hand it round, but despite me measuring that circle, this one's turned out slightly too smaller than this one. So that's another reason that it's not quite right. And as I said, this would still have to be finished off. But I'll pass around the sort of better version and the one that I've made tonight, and then set up the spoon. So the spoon, this isn't my original idea, but I can't for the life of me remember where I saw it. Somewhere on the internet, somebody showed this technique. So what we're going to do with this little spoon is turn this piece first, turn the ball, and then turn the axis round and turn the handle. And to do that, I'm going to put this bit of chipboard on, and more offcuts from that plank of beech. That's the one I want. Cut square. And I'm going to put a bit of double-sided tape on here. And hope there isn't too much dust on it. Okay, and then the tricky bit is getting your fingers in to get the covering off. Which I can't do. Come on. There we go. Right. And then I'm going to stick that onto here. And I've just marked out the center of the ball of the spoon. Which I'm going to line up with that. Push that in there. And press tight. The advice from the chap on the internet was just put a G-clamp on as well. But don't set it going. That's just to give it a bit of oomph, bit of grip. So that should be tight enough to hold it long enough to turn the ball of the spoon. Now, I haven't had one come off yet. I've had a few mistakes, but I haven't had one come off yet. So let's hope it works. Okay. I'll just start this off a little bit slower. Remember to take the lock off. Yeah. There we go. It's okay. And I'll just put this on in case. Again, I would probably turn it round, but I'm running out of time. So this is a pull cut. And I want this to be fairly close to the edges of the square. And I want it to be a bowl shape. So I'm going to go in a little bit to create the bowl. Bring it out a little bit more. Can't actually see what I'm doing there. It's all done by sense, really. I can afford to go a little bit more. And again, my trusty depth gauge. I've only gone halfway so far, so I can go a bit further. Use a slightly smaller spindle gouge. I'm undercutting it at that point. Okay, let's have a look at what it looks like. It's got a little dimple at the end, which is what was the vibration. There we go. So again, I would sand that and maybe take a little bit more care of it, but just looking at the time, I'll move on. It is a very good fit, is double-sided tape. So it takes a bit of getting off. But I reckon it is strong enough. I actually think you could put that on and turn it if you wanted. I'm sure, well, maybe 3 strips of tape, but I'm sure it would be strong enough to hold it, because really most of your pressure is going that way. So a nice little technique. And I say I should thank the man. I think he was an Australian, but I can't find the video again that I watched, so I can't credit him with his tip. So now we change the axis again. To do the handle and the bowl. And again, I'm going to hold it. So there's all kinds of things that can go wrong with these. If you haven't quite got that centered, you can go through the sides. Oh, I should have centered that first. It's way out of center. Let's get that centered. Get the lock off. You could put a mark in, but I'm just doing it by eye. It should be okay. So a couple of mistakes. I'll just show you. That one, I made the neck too thin between the bowl and this, and just snapped. And that one, well, actually, if you see the piece of wood, it's got swirling grain again, so it's the same problem as the other one. It just chipped the bowl out. So either of those might happen, but we've got to try. And if I keep pausing, it's because I'm trying to remember what it is I'm doing. It's been a long day. So we'll go up to 1800. Normally I go about 2000 at home. And one thing that's useful to do is to just mark the center, just to give you a rough idea of what it is, because you can't see the hole while you're turning. And just get that to round. Yeah. What you're trying to do is to make a bowl around that hole. And it can't be too small, but you don't want it too big. So I'm trying to get the center. And to make a sphere around that center.
Okay, listen. Yeah. No. We just have, listen, we just have to be patient. All I'm grateful for is digital media, so at least we can do this, you know? And I just have to, we all have to just wait and see.
Now this is still flat here, so I've got to take quite a bit off, which will mean that I'll lose some of the top of the bowl. Still a bit flat. So, and now it's going upwards, so I'm losing the sphere shape. Almost got rid of the flat. It's gone on that side, but it's not gone at the bottom and it's not gone there. So I'm going to take a little bit more off. And all the time I'm looking at the shape at the back, which is now a sphere. And we're just about there. Good enough. So now we make the handle. I'm going to turn that off. Yep. And I quite like the handle to be quite small, quite thin. And again, the shear scraping to do a bit of shaping. Just pulling the blade along the surface, get a smooth curve. And I'm going for, sometimes it's just a single curve, and then sometimes I've put a bead in the center there. So we'll try that one. Just seems to suit it. Still a bit flat, actually. And then a ball at the end. So we need to bring that round a bit more. More of a tear shape, teardrop. Too fat there, so I'm going to just take a bit off. You get the idea. Tie it in with the other stuff, put a couple of bands there, and a single one there, burn it. Can't see it. There it is. a little burn. I don't know whether you can tell, but it's just taking a little bit longer to burn there. And that's because it's bending ever so slightly as I push it. You do need to get a good bit of tension, pressure on. This is quite hard to sand, but we'll have a go. Again, I'd go up to 320 with that. Now this is very uneven because of the, you've actually taken a bit of the top away. Can't find me 120 paper. Ah, thank you. So this needs sanding flat, really. And the best way to do that is just to put a ruler in there and sand away until you get a bit of a rim, quite thin, but there's a big edge there that I want rid of. So I'm just sanding that away. And then a little bit more here. Find myself taking quite a bit of time at this stage, but really some very subtle changes can make it look nice or make it look terrible. And need to so an ordinary pen blank would make one of these. What I would say is try and find some wood that's tight grain, even grain. You know, you don't want yew or anything that's swirling around. Yew's not a good idea for salt spoons anyway. So to finish off, I just need to find my parting chisel. Again, I've done all that work before I tackle this end. But I still just do a little bit of sanding before I finally cut this off. Get as much done on the lathe as you can to get it as round as possible. And then the saw. A little bit of finishing off there. Forgotten to saw that. I'd probably put that across the bandsaw to get this end off. I could actually have just taken this away because it was held in jaws. I could have cut that off and then I could have sanded the end while it was still on a fairly thick piece here. Have to be careful, but it's strong enough to do it. But you can just cut that off and sand it off by hand. And you've got a little salt spoon. I put a few of these in the sale in September. I think I sold them for £4 each. 3 of them sold. That one didn't. It has got a green stain on it, so that's maybe why. They're quite good fun to make. And there's endless variety. See, I've got a little bead here on this one. This is much thinner. It's a smaller piece of wood. You can use different pieces of wood. But I think the idea lends itself to, well, experimenting, having fun, which, as I say, is what I've decided my wood turning ought to be, and not sort of vast production runs. Oh, sorry. food safe finish. If you like a really shiny bit, you could shine that up with friction polish or Conover wax, but it's probably best to the bit where the food might go in, if anybody actually does spoon these things out. Food safe is perfectly good oil to use. You can use liquid paraffin as well. That's perfectly good safe wise. When I made these, my granddaughter, or my youngest granddaughter, who's 7, said, "I hope you don't sell them because I would like them." And she likes to, she loves mixing potions. She thinks she's a small witch. I think so as well. And she loves to spoon out little bits of this and that, you know, and put them into a jar and mix them together. So there's a couple there for later on. So I hope that's been of some interest to you. It's a little bit rapidly put together this week, but hopefully there's a few ideas there you might want to try yourself. Thank you very much. Or are there any other questions?